Faint praise, exactly. Welcome. It's great to see you.
Well, and thank you very much. And I want to say hello to my friend Ed Rendell. He and I have had a good friendship, and I have a great deal of respect for him. And on camera, off camera, he always tries to work constructively to solve problems. And I really respect and appreciate our friendship. Thanks for having me on.
We've had a lot of wide-ranging discussions, Governor. I guess the first thing to ask you is, how do you see in a Midwestern state where you are that admittedly brought us the likes of Walter Mondale and Huber? You're probably more known for Democrats, really, than others. But what's the mood out there, and what do you anticipate happens at the midterms? How does it finally play out?
Yeah, well, I come to you from the land of Eugene McCarthy, Hubert Humphrey, Walter Mondale, Paul Wellstone, now United States Senator Al Franken. Yeah. But frankly, Minnesota has many of the same challenges as the rest of the nation. Our unemployment rate's a little better. We're at about 7%. You know, the nation's at 9.5% or so. We've been actually adding jobs at a rate faster than the national average here in the last 6 or 8 months, which is good. But still, for Minnesota, for the country, this jobs issue, the economy issue is the overwhelming concern, and we need to do those things that we can to try to encourage businesses to grow and add jobs. And it's not rocket science. They basically tell you, look, you got to give me confidence that the public policies going forward are going to respect and appreciate the private market, keep our costs competitive, try to knock down health care costs. And by the way, we need a workforce that's trained and skilled and educated. Yeah,
Michelle keeps asking, ask Governor Rendell and ask others, you know, and even the president says, I've delivered on 70% of my campaign promises. I've got more of my progressive agenda passed than any president in history. Michelle keeps saying, why aren't his poll numbers at 70%? Why do they keep declining? Why do Democrats' poll numbers keep declining when so much has happened?
Well, my own view of that is, with all due respect to President Obama, he campaigned as a centrist. He stood in Iowa, for example, and promised that health care reform would be done on a bipartisan basis and Republicans would come along. And he has led the country, I think, in a fairly partisan way. And in the meantime, of course, the economy didn't respond positively to all of that. And so he's suffering the consequences from it in terms of the polls. And I just think that he had a big opportunity, and so far he's kicked it in the dugout.
Governor, Representative Kanjorski and Governor Rendell this morning said it's because the American people don't understand the policies.
Well, I don't question the wisdom of the American people, and Ed probably doesn't want to do that either. I don't think so. I just think that the American people have looked at this and said it's not working, it's not what they bargained for, and they're not reacting to it well. And I think they're going to do a mid-course correction here in a few weeks in the November elections.
Well, one of the things I said, Tim, though, was you said it's not working. Well, for example, the health care bill is just starting to go into effect, and there have been some tremendously positive things that have happened in Pennsylvania from the health care bill. For example, 179,000 Pennsylvania small businesses under 25 employees who give health care are going to be able to get a 35% federal tax credit on this year's taxes from that. That's a positive, and businesses are just starting to realize that. You mean that's in the bill? That's great. A high-risk pool, getting rid of pre-existing conditions being a source of denial by health care companies for coverage for people 25 years and under, having families be able to insure their kids up to 26 who can't find jobs and are living at home. Those are so many positives. The seniors getting $250 checks to help them with the donut hole in Medicare Part D. I think you're a fair guy. Those are positive changes. When we ask people about those changes, they say, oh, yeah, that's great. Well, that's in the health care bill.
But Governor Pawlenty, aren't all their premiums going up too?
Yeah, well, Ed names a number of things that I think there was much bipartisan agreement on those pieces of health care reform. But for most people, as you just suggested by your question, the biggest frustration, or one of the biggest frustrations they have with the system, isn't necessarily access to the system, it's cost. And now we see in Minnesota, news out this morning, and for the nation, premiums going up next year as much as 8 to 10% across the country. And the insurers are saying a chunk of that, not all of it, but a chunk of it is because of these new mandates coming on board, and that it's going to get worse over time. So what we did with this federal health care reform is expand access but they didn't control the costs. And for most Americans, this cost issue was the big issue. And on that score, I think you're going to see it's not going to work over the next 4, 5, 10 years.
Well, Tim, let me interject a question on that too. I mean, the exchanges where there's going to be competition, and you and I talked about competition, and you know I was ready to sign on the idea you circulated to the governors. I thought it was a great idea, and part of that got in the bill. But the point of the exchanges, which don't go into operation until 2014, is I'm a consumer. I'm a small business, mid-sized business. I'm an individual. I can now go to the exchange, and instead of one major carrier setting rates for an entire region, there are going to be 10 or 12 carriers competing. You don't think that competition in and of itself, and you and I have talked about competition, you don't think that that's going to lower costs? I do.
Well, in Minnesota, we studied the exchanges because it is an idea that there's a lot of debate about across the country. I think it was in 2008 or 2009 we studied exchanges, and at least as it relates to cost control, setting aside some of the other issues, but at least as it relates to cost control, the group in Minnesota concluded probably wouldn't make much of a difference. I think what would make a difference is, I don't know why I can't go on the internet, Ed, or you can't go on the internet tonight and buy health insurance wherever we want. You've been, and I agree on this, but why should I be limited or you be limited to 2 or 3 choices in our respective states when you can go buy car insurance, life insurance from California, Florida, Ohio? You got to put up some guardrails for consumer protection, but the idea that I'm essentially limited to 3 choices in Minnesota that really don't compete anymore is not competition, and that we should open up. And I appreciate the baby step that's in the bill, but I wish it would have gone much further.
And I agree with you, but Tim, explain to the viewing audience what the guardrails are, because they're important, and we do it in other insurance forms. What are the guardrails?
Well, I think the guardrails are you got to have some minimum quality standards about the type of product that's going to be offered, so you can't have Minnesota people buying dangerous or inadequate product from a different state. So like we did with life insurance, states agreed to a compact and said, we're all going to agree we can sell to each other, but you got to at least meet these minimum quality standards.
Governor,
that would have been a great idea.
I love this quote, and I keep hearing it again and again. This is the lead editorial, blaming the voters, and quoting Senator John Kerry, who said, "We have an electorate that doesn't always pay much attention to what's going on. So people are influenced by a simple slogan rather than the facts or the truth of what's happening." And that comment, say that at your own peril, to underestimate. That's where the Tea Party, I think, comes from, Governor Rendell.
There's a better way to say that, and it's to say that people were spun mistruths. For example, the death panels. The death panels, there was a concerted effort to convince the American people there were death panels in the bill. That was wrong. Someone like Tim Pawlenty would never have done that.
When the polls go against you, you saw what happened when the president said they cling to their religion and their guns. People do not like to hear that they're stupid.
I agree. And it's not that people are stupid. It's
or that they don't because they don't agree with the elitist idea about what's best for them via the government means that they don't understand. That's a horrible way to try to get. You're not going to get elected.
I know we're going to have to go to break, but the example I gave you off camera, if you stopped 1,000 Minnesotans who earn less than $250,000 and said to them, did you get a tax cut out of the Obama stimulus? Tim, I think you'll agree 90% of them would say no, and yet under payroll deduction they did. If they were married, working family, they got $800 in tax cuts. So I think it's the information that the American people are being given that in many cases is misleading. No.
All right, Governor, some final thoughts, and then we're going to see a lot of you between now and 2012?
Well, just that the Pittsburgh Steelers maybe don't even need Ben Roethlisberger, so I know that Ed's probably an Eagles fan.
Well,
but
I'm also a
he's
Steelers fan.
No, but as to 2012, we'll see. I got to finish 2010 first, and I'll make a decision about that in early 11. But I just appreciate the pragmatic approach that Governor Rendell takes to many of these issues in tone and in substance. And again, we don't agree on everything, but I don't think you'd see him be out of touch with kind of the average person in Pennsylvania or the heartland of America. So when you see these sometimes folks who are in ivory towers or on the coast, they're not speaking for how people feel in the middle of the country.
Thanks, Tim.
Yachts in Rhode Island. All right.
Okay.
Thank you, Governor. And we want to, you have an open invitation here as well. I wish you'd come in studio. You were. I think I was out that day, but come back.
I'll take you up on that.
Tim hosts his own radio show in Minnesota.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Wow, and we forgot about Hulk Hogan, or was it Jesse Ventura?
Jesse Ventura.
Yeah. It was one of those guys. Anyway, you got Al Franken.
Linda McMahon.
You got Stuart Smalley in there. That's my favorite. Talk to some of your constituents. I mean, anyway, no. Maybe you're right about people not really paying that much attention. Thanks.
All right.
Governor.
Thanks, Governor. Coming up, fixing the nation's mortgage finance system. Ranking member of the House Financial Services Committee, Congressman Spencer Baucus, gives